Hello, everybody. Welcome to Breaking the Grade live. I'm fighting a little bit of a cold here, so bear with me on that. But hopefully, you can hear me loud and clear. Ken, I'm assuming we are live all across our channels: LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and if you are with us. Feel free to hop into the chat. Let us know where you are, who you are, your role in education. Today, we have really one of the most decorated guests we've ever had on this show. And Paul Vallas will be joining us. He was on another call. He's still a very busy man. And he has always been very busy in the education space. I was looking at Paul's LinkedIn profile here, and he's done so many amazing things, but I'm going to take us back to, let's see here, 1995 to 2001. Paul Vallas, hey, Kit. Paul Vallas was the CEO of Chicago Public Schools for 6 years. That's a long time. Then Paul was the CEO of the School District of Philadelphia for 4 years. Then he was the CEO of the Recovery School District of Louisiana for 5 years. And then he was at the Bridgeport Public Schools for 3 years. So, in a world where CEOs and superintendents are kind of disposed of, for lack of a better term, Paul has made it for a long time in a lot of great places. And now he's made it to us. And I appreciate you joining me, Paul. How you doing?
Fine. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, man. I was, I have a background in TV, so I'm good at filling the air. And it was not hard to do as we went back through your resume. I'm going to review this with everybody. Starting back in 1995, you spent 6 years at Chicago Public Schools as a CEO, 4 years as a CEO at the School District of Philadelphia, 5 years.
Actually 5 years in Philadelphia and in 4 years in New Orleans. My work in New Orleans was with the Recovery School District.
Right.
We, of course, rebuilt the school system after Katrina. And really after my job was to eliminate my job.
That's amazing. And then 3 years in the Bridgeport Public Schools. So, if you can give our audience a little bit of a background of you more as a person, we've got a little bit of an idea of the amazing work you've done in the education space.
Thank you.
Where are you from? All that good stuff.
Well, born and raised outside Chicago, the grandson of Greek American immigrants. We have 6 veterans, 4 police officers, 2 firefighters, and 3 teachers in the family. So just lifelong public servants. Of course, we're Greek, so there had to be a restaurateur somewhere in the midst of that.
Gotcha.
We all grew up. We like to say that my dad wanted to spend more time with the family, so he opened a restaurant, so we all worked together every day. So that was his version of spending more time with the family. But yeah, I mean, just, I don't know. It's just, immigrant family that made good and also, had a deep sense of service. Both my sons, one son's a firefighter, the other son's a police officer. And both, one was a Marine and the other was a Navy corpsman, a combat medic for the 5th Marines in Afghanistan. So my wife was a police officer too. So, we're kind of a small business / public servants.
Wow. Listen, when I told everybody and when we released your show, the first 2 people to reach out to me on LinkedIn were, of course, from Chicago. Chicago people love Chicago people. I don't know if that's like happens in New York. I don't feel like it happens in DC, but 2 Chicago people like, he's a Chicago guy. I'm like, yeah, I know. And he's coming on the show. So thanks for coming on the show. And
my pleasure.
One of the things we're going to talk about today is really what it's like for our audience. And you and I have had this discussion under the sunny skies of San Diego. Really, what it's like for our audience who is generally selling into the K-12 space and or higher ed, very similar in that sense, and what it's like for you on the other side of that desk, because you have overseen multi-billion-dollar budgets. You have rebuilt school systems, and you get to make the call. So, can you talk about what you look for, or other superintendents look for as well, when they want to see if a solution is a fit for their district?
Yeah. Well, let me first of all, let me just say that I think, and let me point out, of course, you can't ever run for elected office like I have without having to just deal with the misinformation that's put out there. I always like to say, if people want to know my background, they can Google me and they get the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, in all of our school districts, we've had resounding success. If success is measured by balanced budgets and significant increases in academic performance, my work in Bridgeport, by the way, was a state takeover. The Supreme Court then, on a technicality, returned the school district to local control. So, so I was only there long enough to balance the budget and to lay out a 5-year financial plan and to negotiate a new collective bargaining agreement, and double the number of and dramatically expand high school choice by opening a number of magnet high schools. So
Wow.
I wasn't there long enough to reap some of the benefits of the initiatives that we push forward. But the bottom line is, in both Chicago and Philadelphia and New Orleans, there were dramatic increases in academic performance. In Philadelphia, over I think it was a 7-8 year period, reading scores, math scores tripled and reading scores doubled across all demographics. And New Orleans, which was the second poorest performing school district in the state of Louisiana, and probably one of the worst districts in the country. If you Google, you can do the research yourself. Led the state in academic improvement for 7 consecutive years by 22 points. So how did that happen? How were budgets balanced, and how were schools improved? And I tell superintendents that this is not complicated. I said, what you have to do is you really have to redesign your budgets so that they're school improvement vehicles. In other words, you've got to design budgets so that they become investment vehicles. So the money that so that you're prioritizing, first of all, classroom support, and you're implementing budgets, or you're spending money in ways that make the schools more attractive. In all of my school districts, enrollment has climbed. I've never been in a school district that lost enrollment. In Chicago, after 15 years and the loss of 115,000 students over a period of 7 years, the school district saw a 40,000 student growth. Now, incidentally, in the last 15 years, they lost another 100,000 students, in part because they've kind of detoured from the policies that we had put in place back in 1995. So the same thing with Philadelphia. So the bottom line is, you've really got to look at budgets as school improvement vehicles, and you have got to really develop budgets that ensure that there is long-term financial stability. So my approach was always to introduce a budget that was actually a 5-year budget. It was a 5-year balanced budget, because I wanted the teachers and the schools and the principals, parents, to know that for 5 years, this was the universe we were dealing with. In other words, there would be predictability, because what really undermines schools when it comes to budgeting is the absence of long-term financial planning, and the fact that from year to year, there's too much predictability. There's not enough consistency. Schools are never known what their budgets are going to be. Teachers are always uncertain about whether or not they're going to have the available resources. So my approach was always to let people know what the universe looked like, what they had to work with over a 5-year period, and that the things that and then this is what they would be getting, and nothing would ever be taken away. If anything, if enrollment growth, additional money was secured, we would only give them more. So having labor peace, all of my school districts have operated with long-term collective bargaining agreements, no strikes, no disruption. The schools knowing what their budgets would be consistent over a 4 or 5 year period, the teachers knowing what their resources would be, that type of stability lends itself to academic improvement, because then the teachers in the schools can focus on instruction and not be diverted by all the things that they seem to be diverted from, that seem to divert them in so many school districts that seem to go from one fiscal crisis to another. So I think that's absolutely critical.
If you,
The second, I'm sorry, so let me
no,
pause.
go ahead. Go ahead.
The second most important thing is really to turn budgets into school improvement vehicles. And what that means is there is a DNA that exists in all high performing schools. And in all the districts I have been in, that DNA is consistent. It's clear. And in New Orleans, Paul Pastorak, and I refer to him as the great Paul Pastorak, who was head of the recovery of the president of the Louisiana school board, a state board of education after Katrina, a former chief legal counsel for NASA, by the way. The approach that we took was he did a study where we looked at the top performing schools in the state: charter schools, private schools, parochial schools, traditional schools, and what we found was there were common best practices in all the schools that were high performing. And so what we did was we looked at the schools that were like 90% meeting or exceeding state standards, 90% poverty, low income. So we were looking at those schools that were, handling challenged populations. And what we discovered was that there were commonalities in each of those schools that were present, whether they were private schools or public schools or charter schools. So those commonalities really kind of guided and governed us when it came to allocating money to schools and on what to prioritize. And those commonalities are really simple. There's no substitute for high standards and quality curriculum instructional models as detailed as the teachers need to support them in the classroom, whether they use the models or not. They could at least have them as a point of reference. But consistency in high quality instruction was critical. And that meant equipping the teachers with the curriculum and instructional supports needed to be effective. That's number one. Number two, there's no substitute for data driving instruction. That means assessing the progress that students were making or lack of progress, and then taking the appropriate interventions. And, spending the additional instructional time or having additional instructional time to help students. But identifying weak students early on and identifying weak teachers early on, as early as the 6th week of the school year, so that you could provide additional resources. So so a student would not struggle. And then the third thing was obviously interventions. In other words, allocating a portion of every school day so that you can provide interventions appropriate to the student's needs. You use the data to identify the need. You then provide those interventions. And what we did in all of those schools was all of our schools would be open 2 additional hours during the school day. The first hour being to provide academic support for students that were struggling, and in the second hour, enrichment, accelerated activities and things like that.
Nice.
And the fourth thing was having an instructional leadership team in the schools to drive instruction and to, in effect, train and mentor and support and evaluate teachers. So every school would have an instructional leadership team. Sometimes that it would be led by the principal. Other times it would be led by a lead teacher, or for that matter, maybe an assistant principal. But the idea here is you have to have an instructional leadership team that helps recruit and train and mentor teachers, identify teachers that are struggling, determining what appropriate supports that are needed. And then the fifth thing that's evident in all these schools is they really allocate enough instructional time on task. Nothing closes the achievement gap faster than more time on task.
Hmm.
We have one of the shorter school years and one of the shorter school days in internationally, and instructional time on task is the big game changer. In New Orleans, where I was not able to standardize the curriculum, and even in Philadelphia, where we did develop a very detailed standardized curriculum, detailed down to the daily lesson plans, the curriculum was not mandated. The curriculum was just made available
Hmm.
to the schools so they could use it as a resource. New teachers who didn't have the content area mastery could use it. Teachers who were first-year teachers who didn't have the experience could use it, etc. But in New Orleans, where all the schools were independent, autonomous schools, they were charter schools, but they were really they weren't charter schools in a traditional sense. They were charter schools in that every school was its individual LEA. Not 90% of the money flowed directly to that school, net of
Wow.
capital expenses, and those schools had autonomy, but they served the neighborhood kids. Now, all those schools had very different. Many of them had different models, but all of them had a longer school day. On the average, students in New Orleans got 34% more instructional time than what was mandated by the state. So that probably was the biggest contributor to the dramatic improvement in academic performance. And let me just give you an example. Among special ed students, over a period of 6 years after Katrina, they went from 11% proficiency, special ed kids, to 44% proficiency.
Hmm.
That was special ed students. So at the end of the day, those things all exist: the quality of the curriculum, the use of data, the early interventions to support students that are struggling, and teachers having an instructional leadership team driving instruction, and obviously and monitoring instruction, etc., and then more instructional time on task. All those things are present in high performing schools. So when I would assemble my budgets, the priority would be not only to push the dollars down to the local school level, but to support what I would refer to as the 5 essential practices, the DNA of high performing schools. And I've never been disappointed. That approach has never let me down,
Yeah.
and I think that's the key.
So you come in here and you've got your five your 5 pillars that have worked in many different places. And what if I am somebody who specializes in curriculum, or in my case, because I was in the after school enrichment space, I know enrichment. How do I approach somebody like you so that I can become a part of Philadelphia or Chicago or New Orleans? What are you looking for in a provider?
Well, look, I mean, first of all, we're looking for a provider that brings in a quality product that has high standards, that can monitor the product, that can provide the data to indicate that the product is effective, and then kind of manage the process. I think that's what we look for. But even when we would do extended day, and this is why we kept our school campuses open for 2 additional hours. In fact, many of our campuses were open through the dinner hour, because in the inner city, we provided children with a third meal, and we wanted to
Mm.
keep kids engaged. A lot of kids, there's a single parent at home working, struggling, a lot of foster kids. The whole idea was to provide a safe place for the students to go. But while much of our many of our after school programs are well, at least 1 hour a day, 4 to 5 days a week was devoted to provide additional instructional support that was tied to how this child was performing and what the child's needs were. We also had accelerated. We also had enrichment. We also had activity for kids who did not need additional instructional support. You see what I mean? So the whole idea was and a lot of times that involved us partnering with outside entities. Like, I was a big fan of Odyssey of the Mind, which was like an enrichment program that gifted students that were accelerated could participate in, and things like that. Creating clubs and creating the type of after school associations that would provide an enriching experience, you see.
Yeah.
So I think what you do with any sort of product like that is you assess and you make a case on why this product is needed, and then you kind of look at you do your own analysis of what the school is doing and what its offerings are, and you basically you find a niche for yourself. You come in prepared to say not only what you can do, but or what you are providing, or the product you is providing, or you are providing, what fits into the kind of, the educational strategy or educational approach that the school is undertaking.
If the core priorities for you, curriculum, intervention, teacher support, and time on task, how do I come in as a solution provider, and how do I make my offer budget proof? Because budgets change. How do I make
Well,
it budget proof so Paul wants it there all the time?
well, look, I can't tell you that without knowing what the product is. But there are a
Just
lot
in
of
general,
products.
we're just talking to our audience.
Yeah, well, this is the fundamental question. I mean, if you have a specific product, whether it's a reading program or a math program, or some sort of activity that introduces students to technology, or for that matter, to high school level things like coding and things like that. I mean, it's, the question is it something that can be integrated into the curriculum, or is it something that can be a part of an after school program? I think what's really important before you try to sell a product to any school district is really to understand what the issues are facing that district, and to try to get a sense of what the district requires of its individual schools. You see what I mean? Is really to kind of understand what the landscape is before you go in, and to think about where your product might fit. I, as a superintendent, always, anytime somebody came to me with a specific product, I always looked at where that product might fit in the mainstream of things. Like, for example, I used Voyager very early on, and this is in the mid to late 1990s, before many of you were born. Because Voyager had this kind of systematic way of identifying students' academic needs, and then basically prescribing certain interventions that could support them. So I eventually built my after-school programs around that model. I used Voyager, but I did what I would always do as a superintendent. If I saw a product that I would like, I would take it, learn from it, cannibalize it, and eventually, improve upon it and make it my own. I like to think that we improved on many products that companies then took to other school districts to enhance their own products. I mean, companies like Voyager and SchoolNet, which did the whole data-driven instruction, the benchmark testing, the evaluations, the assessments. I mean, those companies really expanded, I think, based on their ability to work with us to address our needs. They refined and improved their product. But I think, you really have to understand the landscape, understand what the district is doing, and do your own assessment on where your product might fill gaps.
Yeah,
so it
you
really
and I
depends.
have. We're very well. First of all, in our talk in San Diego, we didn't talk too much about enrichment. My second business was built on the after-school enrichment space. We provided enrichments for schools, in Southeast DC all the way up to Greenwich, Connecticut, and and then we became an aftercare program after that. So I was very big into the aftercare space. So happy to hear that you were a champion of that. There are, I think, some action items for our audience, and I'll run them by you first. Is that I think that, like you're saying here, that the folks in our audience who are CEOs and founders, and they've got solutions, they should make sure they are pitching around Paul's or any superintendent's priorities. They need to define what makes them mission critical to your missions. And I believe, and we always teach this in our course, that you have to practice a curiosity first approach. What was it like when people came to talk to you? Did you appreciate a conversation? Did you want them to come straight out? What worked for you?
Well, I was always open to new innovative ideas. First of all, my approach was to basically understand their product, understand what their product is. I usually, because I have this template, or because I'm really governed by this DNA, I always think in terms of how how is what they're offering going to enhance our 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 common essential practices. And let me point out that the one practice where I talked about extended time on task and instructional support and things like that, that also embodied enrichment and accelerated. Because, for
Mhm.
example, back in the old days when they called it RTI, response to intervention, where we would break kids into tiers and then provide interventions appropriate to those tiers. Uh, 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 and by week 6, we've already broken the kids down in tiers for intervention purposes. We also broke the teachers down in tiers. Those who were
Hmm.
thriving, those who were prospering, those who were just treading water, and those who were struggling. The worst thing to do is to have a weak teacher and allow the teacher to continue to perform below standard uh, 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 in a classroom without support. So we would target our support for those classrooms where the teachers were struggling. So, but by week 6, we're already doing interventions. But we would also do accelerated. So, for example, the students that were not in need of an hour of additional instructional support or interventions, they had got an hour of accelerated enrichment. And in some cases, the older kids actually assisted the teachers working with the kids that were academically struggling. You see what I mean? So
Mm.
the whole
Yeah.
idea, what I called it tier 4, was to have a fourth tier, the enrichment and accelerated tier. You see?
Oh,
So that's the
cool.
approach that we would take. But we're always looking at programs that could enhance and enrich the educational experience. That's why we did programs like Odyssey of the Mind and other programs. That's why we created, like, in every one of our schools, all the kids play chess. I mean, we had clubs. We had all sorts of activities, enrichment activities that could help students develop their minds and give them an opportunity to interact with each other, give them opportunities, whether as you know, uh, uh, you know, um, to like at the high school level, we actually worked with high school students on a business approach. You've heard of junior achievement. It was
Of
like
course.
junior achievement on steroids. So we actually worked with kids that were interested in starting their own businesses. In Chicago, we had like 40, 45 student businesses, and that we actually contracted out with to provide various services for the schools.
Wow.
So the whole idea was really to turn the schools into like a center of community activity 3 days a week. Campuses open on Saturday. Campuses open over the holidays with all sorts of, even on non-school days, with enrichment activities and accelerated activities for the kids so the kids really felt the school was the place that they
Mm.
wanted to be. The school was the place where their nutritional needs could be met. We handed out coats during the winter for the Coats for Kids programs. We provide the supports and the mentoring where it was needed. So they would feel comfortable and see the school as the preferred place to be. And then obviously we our top priorities were our educational priorities, but we used every opportunity to create almost like these learning villages, so
Yeah.
to speak, where the kids could go and the kids could avail themselves to a whole host of activities that would suit their needs or suit their
Gotcha. I am
personalities.
a trained journalist who got a master's degree from Northwestern. I have taken my notes right here. I have closed my notes because I want to go off script a little bit, and I don't want to go too
Okay.
far into politics. But I'm in Washington, and it sounds like President Trump has his sights set on Chicago. So let's not talk about that part. But can you give your thoughts on the reality that we're in now and how we live in it as educators, as solution providers? What's going to happen is seemingly what's going to happen. How do you make your way through it?
Well, look, let me respond to it this other way. In another way, you mentioned Chicago, and we don't need to get into whether or not Trump is going to send in the
Right.
National Guard or not. I personally think that if you're going to help cities, you already have federal law enforcement agencies like the drug enforcement and like the FBI, et cetera, that are already there. If they elevate their presence and they work with the city to identify, to really, to help make arrests and to prosecute violent and habitual criminals under federal law. The penalties are much tougher. Federal prosecutions have always been a great deterrent. And so at the end of the day, there's a constructive role for the federal government to play, short of sending and activating National Guard troops. And incidentally, I was in the National Guard for 13 years. And, I don't think you want the National Guard patrolling the south side and the west side of Chicago. Okay. So anyway, and we're talking about the citizen guard here, but there are things that can be done, and these cities are in crisis, despite the fact that the murder rate has declined, is now returning to pre-COVID levels. Let me point out that the spike in murder nationally was fueled, I believe, in large part by the shutting down of schools in the case of Chicago for 78 consecutive weeks, which had devastating consequences. There was a 50% increase in school-age youth murders and carjackings. Over 50% of carjackings committed by out-of-school age youth. It really spiked. And so, of course, crime obviously began to decline when the schools were reopened, and the hundreds of thousands of kids in Chicago were now back in school. And when the summer jobs and summer programs returned post-COVID, and the kids were off the street. So at the end of the day, so that's all I'll say on that. But on the educational front, look, and it may be less so in smaller cities, smaller school districts, but I really think that that nationally the teacher unions have become highly political, and they've become, in the case of Chicago and elsewhere, they're like political parties, and they've really lost sight of really advocating for policies that directly benefit kids. In Chicago, you got the teachers union. They're anti-cop. They're anti-Israel. They're anti-Semitic. They're, they're really anti-American with their claiming that the migrant crisis has been the product of failed American foreign policy, trying to equate incoming migrants with slavery. It's the rhetoric is over the top. Everything about it is political. The union in Chicago, and I think if you look at the major unions nationally, have spent little of their money actually on representing their members, and most of their money on political activity. Look, I ran against the chief lobbyist and organizer for the Chicago Teachers Union, who lasted 1 year as a high school teacher and 3 years as an elementary school teacher. And it's interesting that these union leaders always seem to be failed teachers. The head of the Chicago Teachers Union lasted 6 years as a teacher, and they were history teachers, both, which is not surprising because they seem to consistently get history wrong with their rhetoric. But the bottom line is they're a political party. I think the union gave my opponent $6 to $7 million. They've become a political party. They're advancing agendas that have nothing to do with education. They do it under the guise that they want to create an environment, and they're trying to, but it's all about overcoming historic inequities and things like that. What you have in the city of Chicago in particular is, because the union leadership likes to throw out things like apartheid and school choice advocates are akin to Southern segregationists. Incidentally, even the black advocates for school choice, I guess, are segregationists. And so you get that rhetoric. You get that rhetoric again and again and again and again. And I basically said, if you look at the Chicago public schools, and I think many urban districts like it, they've really created an apartheid school system. They've created where if you live in Chicago, and you come from a low-income family, it's almost a certain, the overwhelming number will be attending public schools in Chicago, and the overwhelming number of low-income children from low-income families will be Black and Latino. Okay, and if you go to the Chicago public school system, first of all, they were instrumental in ending the state-funded private school scholarship program for low-income families. So there's no avenue for you to get financial support to send your kids to private schools. They have capped and frozen the number of new charters, even charter enrollment, and they are systematically trying to degrade and eventually close charters or convert them to union-run schools that are then absorbed by the district. So they're killing even public school choice. They've declared war on the magnet schools, in part because the magnet schools really, in all honesty, offer a embarrassing contrast with the failing neighborhood schools. So they want to erase that contrast. Incidentally, the majority of the teachers and the union leaders either send their kids to private schools or they have strangely enough gotten their kids enrolled into magnet schools. That's the mayor and the Chicago Teacher Union president herself. So the ultimate hypocrisy. So if you're poor, you're stuck. You're stuck with your neighborhood school. And if you're going to a neighborhood school in Chicago, that neighborhood school is literally put in a straitjacket by the union contract, which blocks the school from lengthening the school day, lengthening the school year, makes it almost impossible to remove an ineffective teacher, literally governs what you will do, what your staffing model will be. You see, so you're stuck in a second-rate school. It's an apartheid school system, or the union likes to call critics of what they're doing Jim Crow. Well, this is the personification of Jim Crow. So if you come from a poor family in Chicago and you attend the Chicago public schools, the overwhelming number whom attend are Black and Latino. The quality of your school is determined by your zip code and your income, and I think that's what you've seen. And the unions nationally, I think, in many of the urban cities, seem to be following Chicago's script. They're focusing so much more time on things other than education. And of course, there is a systematic abandonment of standards. The Chicago Public Schools has already returned to socially promoting children, to discarding tests. They no longer rank schools by academic performance. The union president calls testing a tool and an invention of white supremacists to basically punish and keep down Black kids. I mean, literally, the quote unquote, this is exactly what they're doing. And that's the mentality, because I think they've given up in that their model doesn't work. So now they want to stop keeping score. They want to erase the scorecard, or they want to redefine what constitutes quality schools, or for that matter, quality instruction. But right now, there is no accountability. There's been a complete abandonment. And you've seen it at the state level, too. The state wants to reduce the proficiency, proficiency standard, because the state of Illinois, despite spending between 19 to 64% more per pupil than surrounding states, the test scores are abysmal. The NAEP scores are a disaster. And so, if what you're doing is not working, you can either change what you're doing, or you can stop keeping score. They've elected that it's easier to stop keeping score, and that's just a reality.
Let me ask you, as we wrap up here, Paul. I have a sinus infection, so I was not feeling so good around 3:00 in the morning, and I was awake. What the heck were you doing texting me at 3:42 Eastern time? It's 2:42 your time. You're in Chicago. What are you doing at 2:42 to text me?
Well, my ritual is, and I don't know, they say the older you get, you need to get more sleep. I figure 10 or 15 years from now, I'll be sleeping for eternity. So I don't want to lose any time right now, but being 72 years old. But yeah, I mean, every night, as is a ritual. Even when I was working in Haiti, I would record movies in my iPad, so I'd be able to watch something at night. But I wake up in the morning and I write. Obviously I do some consulting to supplement my retirement income and things like that. But for the most part, I write for a number of publications with great regularity. And so I'll take an issue, I'll explore it, I'll research it, and I'll write. And so this is what I do. That really gives me a lot of satisfaction. But so I will do that during the course of the day. I always end the evening watching a movie. I think I probably watched every decent movie out there, because I've literally watched the movie every night, no matter what time I get home. Every night, it's like my therapy.
Let me ask you a question. I'm going to interrupt you.
Yeah.
What is your favorite Chicago-based movie?
The Fugitive.
Mine too.
Yeah, The
I could
Fugitive.
quote
Yeah.
that whole movie.
Yeah, I remember when they filmed The Fugitive. I was in City Hall because they had that. Remember when Harrison
Of
Ford was
course.
being chased by Tommy
Yeah.
Lee Jones? Yeah, so I remember all the sights. But I found myself after the movie is over, something coming to me, or I don't know, maybe it's something I saw on X or whatever, and then I feel I got to write it all down. So believe it or not, a lot of times I end up after the movie going back and basically throwing out some ideas on what I want to write about the next day. I swear
I
it's kind
believe
of
it.
the weirdest thing. So yeah, I did text you
No,
kind of late,
it's all
didn't
good.
I?
Here,
You know,
listen.
so I
I've
apologize for
been
that.
listening to this podcast, and then we'll go here. But I've been listening to this podcast by Amy Porterfield, and she's somebody I listen to, and um, she writes courses, digital courses, but she talks about the fact that at this point, digital courses um, are a little bit obsolete because AI can write a digital course, but AI will never
Yeah.
replace our point of view. AI will never replace our experiences, people we know, places we've been, things we've experienced, and uh, you will never be replaced. All that you just talked about is so interesting in the writing that you do and the perspective you take. Whether it's from movie or from X or from going to Haiti, this stuff is pure gold.
Yeah, look, AI can't help me. I can't get myself edited for grammar and things like that. You know what I mean? And I like going online. I don't even use AI. You can go to Google and you can it gives you access to research right away. So I can write at an accelerated pace because because the research is at my
Right.
fingertips. You know what I mean? But you have to be skeptical of the research that you're even provided being provided online, because when you ask a question, you
Yeah.
Google it, and they come back and they reference something you
Yeah.
wrote because you've written so much. Then you go, oh, I don't know if this is really I'm the source. So anyway,
That's great.
but no, I'm not saying that AI won't be able to replace us. It's certainly evolving at an accelerated pace, but AI can't make what I write better, and it can't. It just can't. But it's great to be able to go online and to access research and to look at what other
Mm.
people have written, and to get it back in seconds, and that speeds up the
Yeah.
time. So there's certain advantages. But I will tell you this. I think AI does have an approach in education. Right now, I've been working with a group, as you know, and obviously that's how we got
Yeah. Please.
introduced with Jeff
Yep.
Drayton. We got we got introduced through the through
Please
311
talk about it.
literacy, and of course they've been working on developing this great people's manual, which delivers concise bilingual lessons in values, character education, values like resilience, respect, kindness, and integrity with KI students. And there's really an AI component of this. So it's designed to be kind of an enrichment curriculum that focuses on character education. And of course, it is part of the great reading contest that we've had. And 311 Literacy focuses on 311 Literacy focuses on giving young people, whether it's through the schools or for that matter on their own, access to online libraries of thousands of books in subject areas that they're interested in. So, there's certainly the ways to enhance that technologically, but as part of this effort, we've also been working on developing an AI platform. And I'm of the belief, in particular, something I wrote about in City Journal. City Journal is a extension of the Manhattan Institute in New York, and I wrote about vocational ed, and I believe that first of all, there's a big push nationally to make high school more relevant and to allow high schools or give high schools the capacity to offer vocational ed, work study, school to work, to begin training young people, introducing people to the business community and to various occupations, something that's lacking. I mean, the old historic vocational education programs of the 40s, 50s, and 60s have all but vanished. And so there's a push back in that direction. And I think that push is going to be resisted by the teacher unions, who aren't going to want to lose members, and who are going to want vocational education teachers to be certified and all that kind of crap. And we all know that's going to happen. There's going to be a lot of resistance. But AI is coming, and I think AI can play a role in meeting that need. So I got endorsed when I ran for mayor, and lost very narrowly to the current mayor, Brandon Johnson, by 1.5 percentage points. I was endorsed by 24 labor unions, obviously not the teacher union, and many of those unions I've been working with. Many of those unions have programs, have occupational training programs, pre-apprentice programs and things like that, and many of them have expressed an interest in taking their programs and putting it on a platform where that instruction and training can be delivered through kind of an AI on an AI platform, through an AI format. So I think technology, online, virtual classrooms. I think AI. I think there's a role that AI can. I think there's a role that AI can play on an educational level, because the technology is there, and the technology is only going to improve by leaps and bounds. It's almost having a multiplier effect, because AI makes AI better. AI is self-evolving to a certain extent. All right. So, at the end of the day, and Khan Academy has, the success of Khan Academy is in that individualized tutoring. And I think AI is evolving where there's no reason why you can't have individualized instruction and individualized tutoring. So I think schools would do well to look at that, to even invest in that, to build their own plan. But I also think the use of AI could also be a vehicle for delivering, offering occupational training, and offering pre-apprentice programs, without having to build out the auto shops or the wood shops, or they have to build out, to do all the things that you would normally have to do, in order to provide that training. So that's what we're exploring. So we talked to Jeff and some of our backers and funders, and I said, wouldn't it be great if we could develop the capacity not only to provide online tutoring for any student in the core subject areas using AI, using an AI platform, and we're already piloting something similar, but also perhaps our ability to offer kind of online AI-supported pre-nursing, pre-EMT training, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's a real potential if schools are flexible and open-minded enough to explore it, because I really think that technology used properly and effectively can enhance instruction. Let me close by saying one thing, because I talked to you about the essential practices that exist in all high-performing schools. I'm not going to see if you memorize them, but I talked to you about I talked to you about the 5 essential practices. Technology enhances each of these practices. So, for example, when it comes to quality instruction, having the right technology platform can provide the teachers with online technology support, even mentor teachers who can help them navigate their way through the curriculum instructional models. So technology can enhance, the first essential practice, which is quality curriculum, high standards. Technology, obviously, it's a given on how technology can help with data-driven instruction. Looking at student progress and measuring student progress and analyzing that student progress, and that technology can enhance that. Technology can enhance interventions. So many of the intervention programs are actually technology based. I mean, you can go back to the more primitive Read 180, and it was all technology based. You would have somebody monitoring the 180 lab. But the bottom line is, you can do enhanced instruction. You can do enhanced interventions through technology. You can, the 4th essential practices, which is basically instructional, having an instructional leadership team. Well, if you've got that, if you've got the right platform, that instructional leadership team can clearly give individual teachers access to more support and mentoring through a technology platform. So technology can enhance, and support the instructional leadership team, which is there to guarantee quality instruction. And finally, technology can increase the instructional day because the extended day programs, you can literally provide instruction around the clock if you wanted to, through technology aligned to what is being taught during the regular school day. So at the end of the day, technology can actually increase the instructional time on task, and by basically supporting children in kind of non-traditional ways. A lot of times the worst thing you can do is add an hour to the school day and have it like the regular school day.
Right.
But if you have that additional hour and you're doing different things and taking different approaches and focusing on specific problems, technology lends itself to that. So you can actually lengthen the school day and you can lengthen the school year through the use of technology. At pennies of the cost that you would spend if you were providing that additional instructional time live. So, I felt that COVID and the money that was squandered during COVID. I actually wrote about this in the Wall Street Journal when COVID first hit. I talked about the great opportunities that were now going to be presented with this massive infusion of money to really build the technology infrastructure that could enhance and support the essential practices. And unfortunately, too many school districts just failed to take advantage of that. They just simply squandered the money. Well, so I think there are great opportunities. I think there are great opportunities to use technology, even to use AI to enhance those essential practices that constitute the DEA. Sorry about that. The DNA for all high performance schools.
We did not squander our time together, and I can tell you that I have been getting text messages from I have a new producer. His name is Jeffrey Drayton, who's sending me text messages here on LinkedIn saying, thank you for talking about his program, your program, and for having you on. And I actually am going to turn it back to Jeffrey, and I'm going to turn it back to you. And I say thank you for the time in San Diego. You were very busy then, and you've got a lot of great things going on. And I really, truly appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure.
To come on. It really is a really interesting conversation. And Jeffrey said we're going to get a lot of blowback from this conversation. And you know what? Fuck them. I don't care. Well,
people, if people are interested in some of the things that I've written, first of all, my LinkedIn page on Paul Vallas. I also have a public Facebook. It's Paul. It's also the same Paul Vallas.
Yes.
Also, you can Google my name under any subject. I write for the Chicago Tribune. I write for the Chicago Contrarian, which is an independent, very political publication that really tackles issues and offers solutions. And I also write for the Illinois Policy Institute and the occasional City Journal. So I've written about the apartheid school system. I've written about standards. I've written about school choice. I've written about a number of issues related to education, as well as a number of other subjects. But if people are looking, just Google Paul Vallas. Having run a political campaign, you'll get some of the ugly stuff too, like how I sunk the Lusitania, or how I was really the guy piloting the Zeppelin. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or whatever. So you'll get some of that too. It's the vestiges of having run a very tough, combative political campaign.
I'm sure you have very thick skin. We have, and you're continuing to affect people positively. Amani Ware is somebody who I met earlier this week, and she's got a solution called LR Brain Solutions. They're launching on September 1st. And in the chat, she said, thank you to you, Paul, for validating our mission and motivating us to keep building. So if you can keep doing what you're doing, whether it's 1:54 in the afternoon Eastern time or 3:42 a.m. Eastern time, it's all good. We appreciate everything you do.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, Paul. Nice to talk to you. Thank you.